the start of Education Week in Newcastle this morning. More than 1,000 children from schools as far away as Mary Ward joined in prayer in what the Dean of Newcastle, the Very Reverend Robert Beale, describes as the Ministry of Education. The annual ecumenical service was attended by principals from state and private schools, as well as clergy from many denominations in the Newcastle area. Following the service, the students gathered in Civic Park to celebrate the commencement of Education Week. The Regional Director of Education, Mr Alan Beard, and the Director of Catholic Education, Monsignor Coulahan, jointly officiated at the ceremony. The week is designed to highlight the activities being carried on within schools. So, after the official business was over, the children, wired for sound, stole the show. The idea was to show off the lighter side of modern-day schooling with demonstrations of aerobics, gymnastics and trampolining. And, overhead, the teachers, not to be outdone, were carrying on their own campaign.
The former switchboard and control centre at fire headquarters was quite literally a museum piece. Telecom did actually want the switchboard and control facility. Now the fire brigade has moved into the computer age with an electronic control centre. And it's an advance which firemen feel is not before time. Calls to the brigade continue to increase, and even seconds saved can count in effective firefighting. One major advance is a computer which provides a readout of map reference and the nearest fire units to every street in the brigade's area. However, while equipment has been improved, fire brigade unions are still at odds with the Board of Fire Commissioners, which wants the centre manned by one man at night and weekends. Over the next 4 weeks, the one-man operation will be given a trial. The firemen say they're concerned the situation, which might prove the job too hectic for one person, will have disastrous consequences. The Australian Navy has 4 destroyers similar to the Canberra, which was forced to dock in Newcastle last year. The vessels were built in America, but the overall plan calls for 2 more to be built in Australia. That contract is yet to be let, but it almost certainly will be by November, and the ships will be built at the Williamstown dock in Victoria, with guidance from Todd Shipyards, the American company responsible for the design. The Todd executives who spoke to Newcastle engineering specialists today said at least $12 million in ancillary contracts for each ship will go to Australian companies.
It's our job to look into all companies who feel they can support the follow-on destroyer project.
You don't think location would work against the Hunter Valley, being too far away?
Frankly, no. I don't know the freight charges or costs in Australia, but in the United States we're buying commodities and goods from as far away as 3,000 miles, and they're being competitive.
Even for those vessels built in America, Australian companies have supplied components from steel plants, which will contracts worth some $2.5 million since the project began in 1976. It was also suggested today that companies which are leading the build of the destroyer project would be able to seek further contracts when the submarine replacement program begins.
From what you've seen, do you think that Australian manufacturing industry, the specialised industry, is more competitive now than it was perhaps 5 years ago?
I'm not sure whether they're more competitive. They're certainly more interested.
And does that breed better competition?
I would think so. We bought some commodities out here 5 years ago, and from ITE Taplin in Sydney. They are now selling into the United States for a brand new shipbuilding project, LSD project, that is for Lockheed Shipbuilding, and they're beating the American competition.
A club that the members built That's what they're calling the Tea Gardens Hawks Nest Golf Club, a 9-hole course that had its origins in 1976 with a few keen golfers. That is now a club that boasts over 1,000 members. Yesterday they held a Pro-Am to celebrate marked improvements to those early days.
Despite the constant rain, the course looked a picture as many a familiar face drove, pitched and putted on a track that 7 years ago was no more than a 9-hole bunker. Today, with many a willing hand, both members and associates, hand-planting the fairways, the Tea Gardens Hawks Nest Golf Club has turned the tide on those humble beginnings to boast of a beautiful course. And as the president of the club, Clyde Hurl, explains, they have come a long way.
Unreal, actually. It's in the last 5 years we've got completely grass on the course. Tony Mangrum and Freddie Ball and those, because they actually played the first professional match play here, and when you talk to them, if you talk to them later, you'll find that it was a sandpit compared to what it is today. But then again, you win some, you lose some with the weather.
And obviously you've got plans for further extensions to the club.
Yes, we hope to have 18 hole in due course. The greens are second to none in Newcastle, and also I think the way the club is going, it's just the members have supported it fantastically.
Two players that participated in those early days, as Clyde recalls, were the quick swinging, lovable pro of Australian golf Ted Ball from Western Australia and local professional at the Steelworks Club Tony Mangan. And as both mentioned, it's tremendous to see the development in the game of golf at Hawks Nest.
The name Dinny Hazer doesn't mean much to Sydney racegoers, but that could soon change in a big way. The horse is being prepared for its first start, and if he does make it to the track, he will become Australia's biggest racehorse.
He stands at 18 hands, and veteran racing men in Sydney can't recall a taller thoroughbred. The legendary Farlap was a very big horse at 17 hands, and the champion Burnbrew was marginally taller. But Dinny Hazer would make them both look like ponies. Apprentice jockey Ray Silburn weighs only 35 kilos and looks tiny on any horse, but on Dinny Hazer he looks like a speck. As tall as he is, Dinny Hazer still falls well short of the world's tallest horse, an Argentinian crossbred called Furpon, who measured 21 hands and died in 1972. Dinny Hazer will soon leave the Silver Sharp Lodge spelling farm to go into serious training.
He was a big gangly foal, and in fact the biggest foal I've ever seen, ever likely to see.
You call him Bobby, which was the pet name of Farlap.
That's right, John. So if he's anyone here as good as him, well, we'll all be smiling.
Under the guidance of Sid Brown, he might make it to the racetrack one day, and if ever he's involved in a photo finish, he'll certainly have plenty going for him.
A young Newcastle tennis player flies out tomorrow bound for the United States and a long-term tennis scholarship. 19-year-old Lee Pasterfield will begin a 1 year with an option on a further 3-year-long scholarship at Mississippi State University.
In her bedroom at her Broadmeadow home today, Lee, an Australian CHS winner and this year's Country Week women's tennis title holder, spoke about her trip to America. She'll be studying physical education at Mississippi University and giving her tennis, as she puts it, her best shot.
Well, I hope it's going to improve my tennis, of course, and make me a bit more mentally tough, because I can't concentrate all that well, but I hope it really improves it.
You talk about perhaps a lack of concentration. Mm-hmm. No doubt you're aware that the Americans take their tennis extremely seriously. Now, could it be a case of you're going to have to either sink or swim?
Yes, I think I really got to, build myself up mentally up to their standards, because they're just so competitive to what I am personally. I'm sure to what a lot of other Australians are.
Representatives from a number of car clubs attended the meeting to form an association aimed at gaining a system of limited registration for vintage owners who don't always have their cars on the road.
People who had special interest vehicles who didn't use them every day, who only used them for club outings and very occasional trips, if a limited form of registration could be found, for these people, they could use their cars and get a bit more pleasure out of them, and possibly have a few more cars on the road of this calibre, because there are a lot of special interest vehicles that people just can't afford to register, and they sit in their garage, maybe fully restored or whatever, and they're just not used.
Mr Downey said the association may have a fight on its hands with the Department of Motor Transport, but he's confident that their proposal will be accepted. As part of Army Reserve Week, the boys in green challenged the boys in blue. It was best of 3 tug-of-war matches played on Army ground under Army rules. And you can be sure that the police fought that issue out before the match.
What's that say? Heads.
A coin was tossed before the match to see who got to pull downhill. The Army won, and round 1 went to them. Then the teams swapped ends, and the police pulled off a victory. The deciding match was again put to a democratic toss, and the Army came up laughing. That is, until they saw the police coercing with the ref.
It's up to you, sir. Seeing it's a deciding call. Okay.
Game 3, green. But what the police lacked in strength, they made up for in sportsmanship. The challenge is on again next year.
And on this occasion, they got it. Next year, up the
Ladies and gentlemen, there has already been an official...
Members of the Council's Environment Committee have expressed serious concern at a number of aspects, not the least of which is that the final void would be a hole 2 kilometres long and 70 metres deep, and as yet there's no firm plan to fill that hole. It's claimed there are serious gaps in the environmental impact statement prepared for the project.
An obvious oversight in the EIS is that it ignores the existence of the St James Primary School, a school with 400 pupils. The construction of the school was begun some 18 months ago and it's been open since June, but the EIS doesn't mention it, and yet it's just over 2 kilometres from the mine site down in that gully.
Although the mine would produce about 600,000 tonnes of coal a year and provide about 100 jobs for its 10-year life, the plan has prompted the Upper Hunter Trades and Labor Council to call a special meeting to discuss its environmental impact.
Within the next week, the Labor Council will have a special meeting on this Black Hill mine issue.
Ken, can you confirm that you did have an earlier assurance from the Premier that there wouldn't be mining development within 2 kilometres of urban development here?
Yes, sometime last April, the Premier sent us a letter direct to the Labor Council after our objections to Black Hill originally, stating this fact that there'd be no more development within 2 kilometres of the nearest housing.
From the details you've got so far, this development would seem to be contrary to that.
Well, that's the way it seems, yes.
Whatever happens, no new mine in the Hunter Valley can go ahead until the market improves, and by then the pressure of nearby housing could well be considerably greater.
Seen here on bike number 1 for the Toshiba Yamaha dealer team, is currently leading the title chase. Practising with him is West Australian whiz kid Jeff Leask, Honda Australia's #1 rider on bike number 3. Leask is still in there with a chance for the title, presently lying in 7th place. The Bali Ranch Circuit is a favoured venue with the Mr Motocross riders, having the sweeping hills, drop-aways and creek crossings. It's not a place for the faint-hearted. They asked current title leader Stephen Gall if he was confident about Sunday's round.
Well, no, I'm not confident. There's a lot of very, very good riders out there, and I have to be very, very careful with the way I approach Sunday's racing. I must be very consistent and try to maintain the 17 points lead, or if maybe that I can maybe stretch it out a little bit. So I'll be in there with some consistent riding and trying to stretch my lead a little bit, and looking forward to that double points final.
Well, Stephen, how do you find the circuit here?
The circuit's great. The Raymond Terrace Club have done an excellent job on it, and it's looking very, very good for a very fine day's racing on Sunday.
The Mater Hospital at Waratah received $2 million less than its anticipated expenditure for the coming year. Negotiations are still being carried on with the Health Department's regional office, and so no one is willing to make a comment about where the cuts will be made. At the Royal, $1.25 million was sliced off the budget, and the chairman of the board, Mr Graham Mullane, says the hospital has no other alternative but to reduce services. He says nearly all the possibilities for cost-cutting have been exhausted. So now the board is looking at reducing the lesser-used services and cutting down bed numbers. Staff cuts will be the last option. Now, he says, the government has to get its priorities right.
There have been 2 reports suggesting that beds should be closed in the country areas where there's an oversupply. That's within the region, and that hasn't been done, and we're concerned that now the city hospitals are again having to make cuts because of the poor distribution of funds within the region.
In the state were contesting 6 divisions in the under-13s, under-15s and under-17s. The Cheezels series has unearthed a number of national and international champions in its 7-year history, and there's bound to be more following on from this event. Late today, Newcastle's Jeff Sidebottom has won his way through to the semis of the boys under-13s, while local girl Jane Walton, who was recently selected in the New South Wales junior team, looks likely to progress through to the semis in the girls under-17s. Don't be mistaken, this junior squash tournament in Newcastle this weekend is the culmination of a huge tournament, as commentator and former British Open squash winner Barbara Hall explained.
This is actually the biggest tournament in the world. We've had over 5,000 children competing just to get through to the finals in Newcastle this weekend. That's just in New South Wales alone. Three junior world champions from the Cheezels event. Karen Clonder, who won the British junior title, and Chris Dittmar and Peter Nance went on to win the world.
Today's training, which was carried out at the Carrington grain silos, dealt with rescue situations that involve heights. Volunteer rescuers from Mary War, the Central Coast and the Liverpool Rangers were shown how to get to a patient trapped at either the bottom or the top of a steep incline. For some of the volunteers, it was an introduction to abseiling. It looks frightening, but with the right procedure and equipment, it's quite safe and the quickest way to get to a trauma patient trapped at the base of a cliff. Instruction was also given in the use of a Stokes litter, a special basket used to move a patient gently up or down a sheer drop.
Into the basket
Under the watchful
itself.
eye of the rescue police, the
And that
volunteers
way it doesn't
took
matter what
every
happens,
care,
you
even
can't
though
drop.
the
Yeah,
injured
if he happens
patient
to
was
roll,
only a
or if
rag-stuffed dummy.
you lose a rope off one end, if you lose a rope off one end, and she comes to a vertical position.
Former Westmont Shield holder
medal break in the Newcastle final. Bullers Bay are off this week to Sydney for the State Knockout Carnival after winning at the Newcastle Knockout several weeks ago. After weeks after got the consolation title from Woodley. Next year is intended to run the carnival embracing a number of sports, both for boys and girls.